Well, the first thing where I stand on this issue is as follows. I've often been asked in the last several months, do I support the Syrian refugee program? Do I not support it? And I'd like to start as follows. There are about 12 million refugees around the world. These are people who have been in all kinds of conflicts, who've seen some of the most heinous human rights crimes, war crimes, human atrocities, that have been going on for years. Some of these people have been sitting in refugee camps for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 15 years waiting for someone to come by and give them a helping hand. Some of those people are our clients, people who we are helping to bring to Canada, sponsored by groups of 5 people, 5 Kenyan citizens who are concerned. The process has typically taken too long, 5 years, 6 years. So it's a real difficult job to get these people here. They've been waiting many, many years abroad trying to get someone to help them. So it was incredibly surprising for me to see that in this conflict, in the Syrian conflict, which I'm very sympathetic to all the people who are suffering from it, to find out that the government, in the middle of an election campaign, are basically outbidding each other to try to help these people, which is admirable. It would be more admirable if it were not in the middle of an election campaign. But we see how it unfolded. Former Prime Minister Stephen Harper said, he's going to take on 10,000. Now that doesn't sound like a lot of people, but think about it. For the last 20, 30 years that I've been practicing in immigration law, we've only accepted from the entire world, from every conflict, from every region, 25,000 approximately per year. So when Prime Minister Harper said he's going to take in another 10,000, that's a huge number relative to what we are accustomed to doing. And those 10,000 it's an extraordinary number because it's just coming from one region, this particular conflict. So the entire world, we take in 25,000 plus 10,000. Now, when the picture of the little boy surfaced, we all saw that picture. We were all heartbroken from that picture. I've been seeing pictures like this and worse for decades now. When we saw that picture, all of a sudden, the parties started to outbid each other. The NDP said, well, we'll take 10,000, but we'll take another 8,000 or 9,000 every year as long as this conflict is going on. Then we hear from, at that time, Prime Minister candidate Justin Trudeau, who says, you know what, I'm going to take 25,000 from Syria, but I'm going to get it done within this calendar year. So since he became Prime Minister on November 4th, that means he's going to have 57 days to bring in 25,000 new immigrants to Canada from this region, right? Which is impossible to do. And so when I was asked on national television, is this possible? I said, of course it's not possible. It's not possible this is going to be done. And in fact, they missed that deadline. By that deadline, they only brought 6,000. So while it sounds like a great humanitarian program, this really was a function of campaigning for the position of Prime Minister. This is really what it was about. Had the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau at that time, said, look, Canada's not doing enough on the refugee side, and we should up our annual number from 25 to 50,000, it wouldn't bother me. That's great. We're doubling our humanitarian aid to the whole world. But why I'm a bit cynical about this is because this 25,000 was only promised while he was campaigning. There is no attempt to say that this is going to be a new number that we're going to be picking going forward. So it sounds a little bit disingenuous to me, and that's what I think about it. So what we have now is we had a government trying to bring in as many people as they could, as fast as they could, even though that they knew that these people had already reached relative safety. They were not in Syria. They had been now in Lebanon and Jordan and Turkey, some of them for a few years. So there was no need to impose this December 31st deadline. I'm happy that they want to do things quickly. The immigration system is so slow, but really it wasn't like the roof was going to fall in on December 31st. There was nothing happening on December 31st. It was just an arbitrary date, just to show how efficient he is, how generous he is, and when Canadians get together, boy, rah, 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 we can really accomplish something. So what I'm feeling is that this has turned into a bit of a sport rather than really an effort on a long-term basis, on a genuine basis, on a bona fide basis to help refugees at large. My question is, what do we say to people who have been waiting in refugee camps for years? Right? So some people think, well, refugees are not, refugees are expected to jump ahead of the line. That's true. Refugees should jump ahead of the line when that line consists of people who are not in danger, professionals who are coming to Canada, investors who are coming to Canada. That's terrific. But that's not what we're talking about. We are talking about the refugee line. All of the people in that refugee line should be handled in order that they jump into the line. So the Syrian refugees should have gone to the back of the line, waited for all of the other refugees ahead of them to be processed, and then they get processed. It makes no sense to me to take somebody from a current conflict and take them ahead of someone who's been waiting in refugee camps for years from a previous conflict. That's queue jumping inside of the refugee line, and to me, there's nothing more abhorrent to pick one humanitarian case over the other. The only way that we can do it really is in an orderly fashion, in a systematic fashion, according to greatest urgency. But as I said before, this was not an attempt to pull people out of the conflict zone. They were already gone from there. So because we don't have boots on the ground in Syria, we don't have any way, we don't have an embassy. We closed our embassy in 2012 because it was so dangerous. We closed our embassy. So when people give us documents from Syria, how do we check the veracity of those documents? When somebody says, this is my wife, and they don't have a marriage certificate, or they even do have a marriage certificate, how do you know that that's a genuine marriage certificate? How do you know that the children that they're bringing over are their children? How do you know that his claim that he was a mechanic for the last couple of years is a genuine claim? How do you know he was not driving a truck for ISIS? We just don't know. So typically, those background checks would take years to conduct, months to conduct, but 57 days doesn't give you a heck of a lot of time to actually verify anything. And in fact, even if we had more than 57 days, we just simply don't have the means to do it because there's no way we can verify that information. So there are risks with the way this was conceived, it was executed. If you were to ask, what was the selection criteria? We have 2-3 million refugees from Syria who needed a new home. Okay, I get it. We're taking only 25,000. Which ones are we going to pick? No one's ever told me what that criteria is. All I know is that they sent text messages, can you come, are you willing to come to Canada before December 31st? That's not a criteria. That's not the way we pick refugees. It's just not. So there's many aspects of this that are actually very offensive to me. Do they have a roof over their head? Yes. We made sure that everybody's going to have a roof over their head. They prepared hotel rooms where they didn't have hotel rooms in the communities. They provided army barracks, whatever it is that they were supposed to do. So yes, they have a roof over their head. English, I'm sure they're going to be provided with ESL. If they need some income supplementation, I'm sure they will have that. So all of what you call resettlement is going to be guaranteed. The government is not going to let these people fall through the cracks because I think their interests are in sync. The federal government has to look good on this project because this is their own conception. It's their baby. They're going to have to make sure that no one looks like they've been left out on the street. But if you talk about resettlement in a different way, if you talk about a cultural resettlement, you have to understand that Canada is one of the most peaceful countries in the world. When we have tremendous conflict, when we have conflicts which affect our very essence and who we are. For example, Quebec's, seeking to be independent. Big debate. What do? We go to the Supreme Court of Canada and we ask for a question. We run to Meech Lake, we talk about it, and we come up with a court decision and we resolve our conflicts like that. Syria is not Canada. Syria is in a part of the world that is the most dangerous part of the world. Culturally, it is a place where conflict, where differences of opinion are resolved by armed conflict, by terrorism, by intimidation. That's what that part of the world is known for. I mean, there's great cultural things that have come out of that region, but you have to admit that there are terrible conflicts. Now, some people will say, well, that's Canada's role, and the Americans, all these countries are somehow responsible for the conflict. Well, I'm not going to debate that, and I don't really care. What I do know is that that is an area where we see tremendous brutality. We see the oppression of women, the oppression of gays, the oppression of minorities. It is a place where we see decapitations, we see mass rapes, we see people having their villages burned down, we see people destroying artifacts that have stood thousands of years. That is what we are talking about. And now you're bringing a group of people in a hurried fashion, some in 57 days, some in 3 or 4 months. And you ask me the question, is resettlement working or is it not working? I don't know. We're going to have to see how some of these people relate to Canadian values. For the first time, they're going to be in a community where we have people living a gay lifestyle openly. How will they deal with that? We have women in Canada who exercise positions of authority, policemen, military personnel, judges, crowns. How will some of these people adjust to that reality? Will they be able to exhibit the Canadian tolerance that we have for gender equality, for equality of different sexual orientations? That's a big question. What about minorities? For example, people coming from that part of the country, well, they tolerate their own religion very well, but will they tolerate other religions very well? I'm not sure. I don't know the answers to those questions. Now, maybe the parents will have difficulty. Maybe the kids that are starting school on the primary level, maybe they will learn how to adjust to these realities, maybe in spite of what they might learn at home. But it's an open question as to culturally whether there will be a resettlement. There's a question as to whether or not things that are socially acceptable overseas in a country that is immersed in conflict for years, whether or not they're going to be able to adjust to life in Canada. What we see in Europe really is looking into the future. You know, you always judge people or a group by their behavior in the past. I mean, if you are inclined to do something in the past or inclined to do in the future, we see the very same group of people, Syrian refugees, resettling in Europe, which are cultures similar to ours, liberal cultures, Western cultures, and they are in conflict. Let's not kid ourselves. They are in conflict. There is no doubt that there is a good percentage that are thrilled to get away from the conflict and thrilled to make a new life in Europe, and that's terrific. That's wonderful. That's exactly what is supposed to happen. But you cannot tell me that all of them are adjusting that way. We see videos constantly on the internet, on YouTube, on all over the place, where we see riots in the streets, cars being turned over, being set on fire, women having their skirts pulled up, women who are being raped, people who are storming police stations, who are throwing rocks at police. We see you know, I've seen even images of war memorials which were, you know, vandalized and things like these. These are things that represent the West. And there are a lot of people that are coming in this group who have nothing but animosity towards the West. And so this is something that, you know, somebody has to deal with. Europe is now realizing that it's like a scale. At some point, when you put enough weight on this side, it tips. And I think they are now either at or near a tipping point where they will no longer be able to reverse the effect of policies which may have been ill-considered. Like I said, I've been an advocate for refugees and for immigrants all my life, but things in certain doses are beneficial. Things in large doses could be detrimental, because in a liberal society, you have to be careful about those people, I think, that you admit, because it's important that our values remain. That is, values of openness, fairness, justice, freedoms. That's what we represent. And when those freedoms are being challenged and there's nothing you can do about it, we offer those freedoms to everybody. Freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, freedom of association. When those freedoms are being are being used to produce violence and intolerance, there's very few tools that we have to reverse that. And I think we need to be very careful about immigration policy when it is not done carefully. We also have to remember that we are not alone in the world. The West is far removed from this conflict. There are countries in the area who have similar cultures, similar languages, similar traditions that can easily jump into the fray and create a venue of refuge that is very similar to their own homes, the same look and feel that was in the place where they left, because the violence, unfortunately, those countries are not participating. So we are producing something that is really not appropriate. It's a solution that is not the next best solution. The best solution, if you can't stay in Syria, you would stay in the region. You would provide a regional solution. And if the countries in the region don't have the financial or economic ability to provide refuge for large groups, so then the international community has to get involved and say, hey, listen, we don't want you, neighboring country, to take on the entire financial or economic load. We understand how difficult that is. We don't even need you to give them a permanent solution, just a temporary one, and we, the international community, will share in the cost of doing that. That is an option that could have been used. But now what you're going to do in Canada, you are going to transport large groups of people across the ocean to a new continent, learn a new language, learn a new way of doing business. So for example, if I was an architect or an engineer or a doctor in Syria minding my own business and having a terrific life over there, right? And you now take me and you spend all this money to send me over to Canada, what do you think is going to happen? Do you really think that this person is going to hit the ground running and start designing bridges over lakes in Canada and doing brain surgery in Canada? He will probably never work in his profession in Canada. So the best result would be to move him out of Syria, moving him out of the conflict zone, putting him in an area nearby where he may be able to continue his profession and his practice, his or her business or professional practice, and then when the conflict is over, to be able to return to their country. That is the ideal solution, in my opinion. But that's not what we did. We had a competition between three people all vying to be Prime Minister of Canada, and the one who bid the most got the job. That's not refugee policy, and it's going to cost us per capita a lot more than it would have cost us had we tried a local regional solution, kept everybody there, and had the international community come together and say, look, we've got to provide some temporary housing, we've got to provide medical facilities, housing, schooling, all of that stuff. That should have been actually the right result. If anybody wants to talk about this discussion honestly and responsibly, that's a discussion that needed to be had. But I think somebody once famously said that elections are not a good time to talk about things, complex issues. So I think that's what happened. We just came up with an idea, 25,000 by December 31st, and off we went.